Wanted to talk about some very important aspects of hiding your deer blind. You have to hide your deer blind when you hunt. For example, you see the redneck behind us. We're taking some extra steps to hide this because it's a very important blind for us. We shot some nice bucks out here. We've been able to watch some 4-year-olds, had some near misses with some 5-6-year-olds last year that just weren't here when we were here, kind of a cat and mouse game. The bottom line is we can hunt this over and over again and we can get in and out of the blind without spooking deer, and we want to make sure we never spook deer, so we're even taking more precautions for doing that. So really want to talk about several ways to hide your deer blinds. You know, a lot of times I talk about the 100-yard test. If you can see the blind from 100 yards, that's not good enough. It's a little bit different when that blind is actually brushed in a little bit and the first point that it's not silhouetted. And what I mean by that is you can see the blind behind me, that's on a 10-foot stand. Redneck makes some really nice 15-foot stands. Kind of cool to be hunting up that high, but at the same time, you put that blind above that gray dogwood growth so it's silhouetted and shows out, sticks out just like a box. It seems like deer don't mind if it's an extension of brush, either at the end or above it, certainly in the middle. But when it's off by itself away from the brush line or tree line, that's when problems really become apparent, and you see those mature bucks looking at those blinds. Look at it this way, we've all seen where bucks get spooked out by a box this big. It's called a trail camera. So we hide our trail cameras. We make sure that there's a trunk wider than the camera, that camera's not silhouetted. We put them about 6 feet in the air. We use low glow or blackout with our Exodus trail cameras, and that seems to suffice. We don't get noticed by those deer, and I call it, you know, 3% of the time, 1% of the time, but we'll have 100 pictures. A deer might look at it 1, 2, 3 times, and even that's a lot. We had 12 out of 14 setups a couple years ago. Deer never looked at during the year. We never noticed them looking. And so that's what you really want. You want to make sure that deer can't see this, but they're getting spooked out by a box this big. Imagine when it's a 6x6 redneck or a 5x5 or whatever kind of box you're using. They literally get spooked out by 4 inches wide by 7 inches high with a trail camera because they notice that, they see it. And I'm talking about during the daylight. We have a lot of deer that have walked by cameras that notice it during the day and stare at it, and you can bet you get one picture of that mature buck and he's gone. You never get a picture of him again. But at night, unless they're seeing that red glow of an infrared, which we don't use, then they're not going to be spooked. So we'll have a camera where all the deer walk by. They don't look at the camera during the night, but everyone that walks by during the day does. We even have does that walk by. You can see fawns 50 yards behind. They walk by, look just like their mom did. That's not a good thing, and it's certainly not a good thing when it comes to deer blinds. And a lot of times it has to do with if the deer can easily see the blinds sticking out, well, they can obviously see you walking in and out, so that spooks out this. This is a very important food plot right here. I shot a really nice buck and one, we call them, with a bow right down here. There's a water hole, and we love this whole system. We love the bedding area that's taking place. We've cut bedding area along here. So this is a very important piece of our property and a piece of the puzzle for putting everything together. Now, silhouetting is one thing. Making sure that it's not silhouetting. Now, we also encourage you to put the blind behind the brush, in the brush, as opposed to in front of the brush. You know, the old adage was with deer hunting, it didn't matter if the cover was in front of you or behind you. You were blended in. The deer, you blended in with that wall. That's not the case with a deer blind. It's mostly not the case with a deer blind, because, or with you even hunting sitting on the ground, because if you move a little bit, they'll see a finger move. Sometimes see your eyes blink back and forth, really spooks them when they're close. But certainly if you're lifting a finger, moving your bow to get a shot, it's always better to be behind something and have some walls. So we have some great locations. We have a red cedar tree that we've shot a couple bucks out of at less than 30 yards of the bow. We have a really nice redneck blind set up behind a red cedar, and we've shot a couple bucks less than 30 yards out of that, and we put that blind directly behind the red cedar, and then spent hours, again hours last season too, clearing out shooting lanes so we could shoot on either side of that. So when you're on the food plot looking back in that area, you can't see the blind. Now that's something behind. I also encourage you to plant in layers and to screen in layers. And what do I mean by that? Well, in this case right here, this is always corn out here. To the left, we were stripping the corn. What we're doing is we're taking corn, we're closing off this entire mouth of the food plot right here. Past the oak tree right here, we're gonna have corn about to that brush pile. We're taking out that brush pile, putting in a corner that used to be a water hole back there. So we're getting rid of that debris. And we're going to really clean this up out here so we can have a big bank of corn out front here that'll be over an acre. It's a big solid block, so that gets eaten less. We find long skinny rows of corn get hit really hard, especially when they parallel a wood line. Critters going in and out, they're not seen by predators. When you have this big block out here, they're not just taking those rows and hitting those rows that are long and narrow and picking on several rows. They have a whole block of corn with many rows to deal with, and it lasts a lot longer. Also, what we're finding with the corn is that the deer typically aren't hitting the corn until November, December timeframe. That means early season, we can sneak into a stand on this big oak right in the corn, blow our scent back into the corn. We can hide, watch that green. The deer go through the green, hit the water hole, and they're out to the ag fields. It's a really cool movement when they can hunt. We can actually blow our scent in the early season, early half of the season, into the standing corn. But bottom line is it's a layer. So we have this layer of corn. Corn by itself, or sunflowers, any type of vining, beans, sun hemp, very, even some of the sugar-filled sorghum stalks, very poor screening because it's a food source. So you're trying to screen yourself from accessing and from spooking deer. You have your access covered up, your stand location, you're climbing in and out, and it's a food source, so the deer just stand there in the food on those outside rows. If they're feeding there, and can watch you get in and out. So we have the corn. That alone wouldn't be good enough, but imagine corn, and then we have 30 feet of switchgrass behind us, 20 feet wide of switchgrass that extends all the way around this mouth. In fact, it goes all the way to the back corner right here. So we have 30 foot of width of switchgrass all the way in this outer edge. Then we have corn. That wasn't good enough for me because the switch alone, that redneck would stick above the switch. Now we could put it on a 5-foot stand, which we do. In another location, we have the availability of a 10-foot stand. In fact, we left 5 feet off and put the redneck on a 5-footer because then it was in the gray dogwood just above it, and we could watch that entire food plot. This redneck was already set up in another area. It was easy for us to install here on a 10-foot stand, and we had the height of the brush to get it above. We didn't need to chop that dogwood down in half. I like the height. You're less likely to be at eye level. You can get away with a little bit more movement even in the blind. So these layers, again, we have corn, switchgrass. So now deer that are even in feeding in this outer layer of corn don't see us coming in because they have a 20-foot bank of switchgrass. Then we have the gray dogwood bushes that we put the blind behind, you know, again, getting it behind. And then finally, a last way to make sure, and a fourth way to screen and make sure your blinds are hidden, is we're actually planting right around the blind. And let's go take a look. The guys from Big Rock Tree, Seth and Tom, they're actually working on that right now. I don't know what condition it's in, but what we're doing is we're putting a row of hybrid poplars right next to the stand, the base stand of the redneck, or hybrid willows. So those usually have 3 trunks. They have a lot of leaves. They have good branches. And then we're putting an outer row of 6 silky willows. Silky willows don't get eaten readily by deer. The hybrid willows do a little bit. We don't worry about it too much back here. But we're going to plant those so that we actually have shrubs on the outside, trees on the inside. And the whole goal would be in the future is that we actually have limbs and branches coming up in front of those windows that we have to actually cut out. And that's what we want to do, and we're trying to do in all of our locations, whether we're putting it behind a red cedar or we're actually building around it, putting it behind screening walls, whether it's corn, switchgrass, shrubs, and then planting. We're trying to do everything in this location right now because it's so critical. We're not doing this for the fun of it. You know, when you see on the channel, if I'm making recommendations to my clients, to my readers, viewers, you know, we're working face to face with our clients. We can't look them in the eye and say, do this, just to sell something or sell a product. We're not selling those products anyways. We're doing it because we think it works. And so that's what I do on my own land. That's what we're doing here. So let's go check this out, what the guys from Big Rock are doing, and just see what it looks like, and see what it looks like to build around your redneck. We're doing it in this location, another, and the other locations are pretty good. This one wasn't bad. We hunt this a lot. We get in and out with spooking deer, but we could take it one step further. We've been able to do well, and this switchgrass is new. This is 1-year-old switchgrass, and I mowed it a few times. You can see some of the stalks are about 3 feet high, but all these clusters of switchgrass coming in. So at the base of all this switchgrass that was coming up. Now actually, this is a good cluster right here. Dylan can show you. You can see my boot. You can see all the switchgrass starting to come in. So you can start to see these clusters around here. If you look at this, here's the old dead switchgrass. And look at all those those green pieces of grass coming up. Again, I like showing this often because people really confuse this. Switchgrass is round on the end. This portion was in the ground, and you can see that reddish purple stem at the base, but it's a round shoot of grass. It's easy to see when it's already been growing. You can see all the clusters. Look at all this. It's interesting, none of this was growing. I left home to go on a little trip last Saturday. We came back yesterday, Thursday. So just about 5 days. And a lot of this switch is already about 8 inches high that's growing here. So it's doing really well, but this switch will be 6-7 feet high. It's a 20-foot width. We got access on the outside. We can get around this food plot without spooking deer back there. The actual start of the green food plot will be about 60-70 yards from here. We'll have that bank of corn, the switch, the gray dogwood. And let's see what the guys are doing over here. So first of all, they're laying the matting down, and it seems like overkill, but it's not. Weeds can take over any planting, and we take great precautions to make sure weeds aren't taking over our switchgrass. And then certainly with the shrubs here, with the silky willows and then the hybrid willow trees, we're making sure. So they're going to put the matting down, and then they're going to poke holes through that matting, and they're going to stick those shrubs in there. These are pinned down. We're going to have a hybrid willow on each corner, and then we'll have 3 silky willows, or 4, probably 1 in the corner, 3 on the sides. So maybe 7 out here flanking this outside. Of course, the ladder, the stand, it's straight south here, so we're getting full sun on this. So we're going to put a big wall around this. We have the gray dogwood here, silky willows, the hybrid willow on this side. Seems like overkill, but it's not, because we can't afford to spook the deer out of there. We have a lot riding on this. We have a stand over here. We have a redneck blind right here. We have a tree stand location down here. We have a tree stand location down the bottom with a water hole. So we have water hole high, water hole low. So what happens here affects everything. If we spook out the food plot, then we spook out the bedding areas. This has to be your #1 sanctuary. With hunters hunting their food plots often and too much, it never is a mistake to be extra careful when it comes to hiding your blinds, hiding your access, and making sure you can get on and off your land without spooking deer. You can see this. We're hiding the silhouette. We're putting it behind cover. We're creating layers of cover. More is better. And then finally, we're building cover around it to make sure that we can have a safe entrance and exit for many deer hunts to come, coming into this season, let alone this season and beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to '93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.